The baby monitor crackled. Caroline wasn't supposed to be listening. She was in the nursery at 11 at night, 8 months pregnant, folding the same onesie for the third time because she couldn't sleep. The monitor on the dresser, the one she had charged for the first time that evening just to test it, picked up a voice from downstairs. Her husband's voice, warm, calm, completely at ease. She won't fight it. You know how she gets with the baby. She'll be emotional, distracted. By the time she figures out what's happened, it'll already be done. Then a woman's voice, smooth, familiar. And the accounts? Completed Thursday, he said. She has no visibility. I structured it that way 2 years ago. Caroline went completely still. The onesie tore slightly where her fingers tightened around it. She looked at the monitor. The timestamp was recording every word. She did not touch it. She let it run. Her husband was downstairs, telling his mistress exactly how he planned to take her company, her assets, and her future. While she stood 30 feet above him, listening to every single word. He thought she was asleep. He thought she was distracted by its pregnancy. He thought he had already won. He had no idea who he married. Stay with us, because what Caroline does in the next 100 minutes will show you exactly what a woman looks like when she refuses to lose everything she built. Lesson statement. This is a story about what happens when the person who was supposed to protect you becomes the greatest threat you have ever faced. And you discover, in the hardest possible way, that the strength you needed was inside you the entire time. If this story moved you, if you have ever been underestimated by someone who should have believed in you, or if you simply need to be reminded today that women who build things are harder to break than anyone thinks, give this video a like. Drop a comment telling us what moment hit you hardest, and share it with someone who needs to hear it right now. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss a story like this one. Every week, we bring you women who refuse to be written out of their own story.
The white noise started at 11:14. Caroline Ashworth stood in the nursery doorway and listened to it. The sound machine on the windowsill breathed its steady ocean hiss into the sage green room. The crib stood in the corner, assembled and waiting. The mobile above it, small white stars and crescent moons, turned slowly in the draft from the heating vent. She could not sleep. She had not been able to sleep properly in 6 weeks. Dr. Howell said this was normal. The baby pressed against her spine at night. Her hips ached. Her mind ran lists she could not stop. Product launch timelines, board meeting agendas. The name she still was not entirely certain about. Eleanor. She had been saying it quietly to herself for 3 days. Eleanor Ashworth. It sounded right. It sounded like something that would last. She walked into the nursery in her bare feet. The floor was warm. She had installed radiant heating when they renovated, a detail Preston called excessive and she called necessary. She pressed her toes into the wood and felt the gentle warmth come up through them and thought, I was right about the floor. She was 34 years old and 8 months pregnant, and she had not been right about everything, but she had been right about the floor. The onesies were in the top drawer of the dresser. She had already folded them twice. She opened the drawer and took them out and began folding them again, because the act of folding small things was the only thing that made her brain go quiet at 11 at night. White onesie, yellow ducks printed across the chest. She smoothed the snaps flat. The baby monitor sat on top of the dresser. She had ordered it 4 months ago. High-end model, 2-way audio, a screen that showed temperature and humidity, a built-in nightlight that cycled through soft color She had charged it tonight for the first time, just to test it. The parent unit was in her hand. The base unit was downstairs in Preston's study, where she had left it by accident when she was reorganizing the house last week. She had meant to move it. She pressed the power button. Static, then the low hum of a room at night, the particular silence of a house where someone was still awake. Then Preston's voice. She won't fight it. You know how she gets with the baby. She'll be emotional, distracted. By the time she figures out what's happened, it'll already be done. Caroline went completely still. The onesie was in her hands. She did not put it down. She held it tighter. A woman's voice came through the monitor, smooth, unhurried, the voice of someone who was comfortable in the space she occupied. "And the board vote?" Preston again. "I have 4 votes locked. I need 1 more. Clifford will come around when he sees the numbers. He always does." "And the accounts?" A pause. Caroline counted the seconds of it. 1, 2, 3. "The offshore transfers were completed Thursday," Preston said. "She has no visibility into those accounts. I structured it that way 2 years ago. She trusted me with the finance side. She was always more interested in the product." 2 years ago. The onesie tore slightly at the seam where her fingers had tightened around it. "And afterward," the woman said, "what happens to her?" Another pause. Shorter this time. "She keeps the house. She keeps the settlement. It's generous. I'm not unreasonable." "You're taking her company. I'm taking my fair share of what I helped build," Preston said. His voice was steady, patient, the voice of a man explaining something obvious. "The company exists because of my operational work. The board knows that. I've spent 3 years making sure they know that." Caroline looked at the baby monitor in her hand. The little green sound level bar pulsed with each word her husband said. She turned the volume up 1 click. The woman's voice again. Delia. She knew that voice. She had heard it 1,000 times in meetings, in hallways, through conference call speakers. Delia Forsyth, Preston's personal assistant, 31 years old, good at her job. Caroline had once told Preston he was lucky to have her. "What about the baby?" Delia asked. "What about her?" Preston said. "She's due in 3 weeks, Preston." A silence. Then, "I know when she's due." "And you're going to do this now." "The timing isn't ideal," he said, "but the board vote is scheduled. I can't move it, and honestly," he paused, "the pregnancy is actually useful. Caroline will be focused on the baby. She won't be watching the share registry. She won't be thinking about offshore structures." Caroline stood in the nursery in her bare feet on the warm floor. The baby kicked, hard, right under her ribs. She pressed one hand to the spot without looking down. Her eyes stayed on the monitor. She thought one thing, one clear, cold thing. He has no idea I'm standing here. She looked at the monitor screen. The timestamp read 11:17. The recording indicator, a small red dot she had not noticed before, was lit. It had been recording since she turned the unit on. She did not touch the recording indicator. She let it run. Preston was talking again. Something about share reclassification. Something about a temporary operational restructuring. She heard the words, but she was not processing them the way she had been processing them 30 seconds ago. Her brain had shifted into a different gear, a gear she recognized, the gear she used in negotiations when the other side revealed something they had not meant to reveal, the gear that said, "You now know more than they think you know. Do not waste it." "When do you need me to file the proxy materials?" Delia asked. "Monday morning. Everything needs to be in place before she comes back from maternity leave." "She might not take maternity leave." Preston laughed. It was a comfortable laugh. Easy. The laugh of a man who believed he was completely safe. "She'll take maternity leave," he said. "She has a newborn. Even Caroline has limits." The laugh faded. The monitor crackled once and went quiet. Caroline stood in the nursery for one more minute. She held the duck onesie. She smoothed the torn seam with her thumb back and forth, the way she smoothed things that had been damaged and could not be easily fixed. Then she picked up her phone. She called Nate Graves. It was 11:22 at night. He answered on the second ring. "Caroline, everything okay?" "Nate," she said. Her voice was completely steady. "I need you to listen to something." She sent him the audio file at 11:26. She stayed in the nursery while he listened. She stood at the window and looked out at the back garden. Preston had promised to have it landscaped before the baby came. The flower beds were still bare. The stone path he said he would lay was still just a patch of dark soil between the grass. She had stopped reminding him about it in February. Nate came back on the line at 11:31. "I'm listening to it a second time," he said. "Don't say anything yet." She did not say anything. She folded the duck onesie and put it back in the drawer. She folded another one, white with small green turtles. She smoothed it flat. The baby was quiet now, settled against her left side, the weight of her daughter redistributed in a way that was somehow comfortable, the way her daughter had been rearranging herself for months, finding her own space, making herself at home. "All right," Nate said. "Tell me," she said. "The voice is Preston. No question. The woman. That's Delia Forsyth?" "Yes." "The offshore account reference," Nate said slowly. "That's not something I knew about. Did you know about it?" "No." A pause. She could hear him writing. Nate always wrote things down. He had 3 yellow legal pads going at any given time, and he could find any note on any of them within 30 seconds. "He said 2 years, she said. "I heard that." "He's been running a parallel structure for 2 years, Nate." "I know. While I was—" She stopped. She pressed her free hand flat against the dresser top. "While I was building the Series D in the Hargrove contract, and the Singapore office, while I was doing all of that, he was building something else. Caroline, I need you to do something for me right now." "What?" "I need you to not go downstairs," he said. "Can you do that?" She looked at the nursery door. Closed. On the other side of it, somewhere in the house, was her husband. "Yes," she said. "I can do that." "Good. Stay in the nursery. I'm going to make some calls." She stayed in the nursery. At 12:17, she heard Preston's footsteps on the stairs. She heard him pause in the hallway. The nursery door opened, just a crack. A thin line of light from the hallway fell across the floor. She closed her eyes. She kept her breathing even. She sat in the glider, with her head tilted back, the way she slept when she finally slept, and she listened to him stand there. She counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 12 seconds. Then the door pulled gently closed. She opened her eyes in the dark. He had no idea, and that was the only advantage she had. But she had built entire companies on less. The coffee had gone cold by 3 in the morning. Caroline held the mug anyway. It was something to hold. The nursery glider rocked slightly with the weight of her. The particular rhythm it had found in the last few weeks of her sitting here at odd hours, and the room smelled like lavender wood polish, and the faint, sweet scent of new fabric from the curtains she had hung herself 2 weeks ago. Nate was on the phone again. "I want you to listen to the recording one more time," he said. "Tell me everything you hear the second time that you didn't hear the first time." She pressed play. The first time she had heard it, she heard the shock. The words had hit her like something physical, like walking into a wall she did not know was there. The second time was different. The second time, she heard the precision. Preston's voice did not waver once. He was not nervous. He was not conflicted. He spoke about offshore account structures and board vote timelines with the same tone he used when he talked about quarterly projections in their Monday morning meetings. The tone of a man reviewing something he had prepared thoroughly. Something he knew cold. 2 years ago. He said it so casually. 2 years ago I structured it that way. He's not improvising, she said quietly. He's reporting. He's telling her the status of a plan. Yes, Nate said. This is a progress update. He's been reporting to her on this for a long time. That's how it reads to me, too. She set the mug down on the small table beside the glider. The table had a ring stain on it from another late night months ago, and she had meant to get a coaster and forgotten, and now there was a permanent ring, and she had stopped being bothered by it, because there were other things to be bothered by. God, she thought, the signs were there? Not signs of the affair, exactly. She did not know if that was even the right word for what Delia was. The signs of a man who was always calculating, always measuring. She had seen it, and she had called it ambition, which she admired. She had seen it and called it drive, which she found attractive. She had seen him watching the board members at dinner parties, tracking who said what to whom, and she had thought, he understands people. He is going to be a real partner in this. She had been so impressed by her own judgment. I was so stupid, she thought. The word was cold and clear, not self-pitying, just accurate. Walk me through the financial access structure, Nate said. What does he have access to that you gave him? She went through it. When Preston came on as COO 3 years ago, she had restructured his access to match the role. He had full visibility into operational accounts, vendor contracts, payroll. She had given him executive access to the offshore structures during the IPO 18 months ago, when she was managing 7 things at once and he had offered to handle the finance meetings. You're so busy with the product side, he had said. I'll take the finance meetings. Let me carry some of this. She had been grateful. She remembered being grateful. The particular stupidity of trusting someone who told you exactly what you wanted to hear. Not because they knew what you needed, because they had studied what you needed, and they gave it to you precisely. Open your executive dashboard, Nate said. She opened it on her phone. The interface she had designed herself 2 years ago, clean and efficient. She navigated to the offshore account panel. Access denied, 2 words, small. White text on a gray background. She looked at them for a long time. He changed my access, she said. When? I don't know. It was working 6 weeks ago. I checked before my 3rd trimester appointment because I wanted to review the Q4 numbers. So sometime in the last 6 weeks. Nate paused. He knew you would be distracted. The last month of pregnancy, the baby preparations, he timed it. She closed the dashboard. She thought about the IPO restructuring 18 months ago. His idea. We need to protect your assets, Caro. The restructuring creates a buffer. If the market moves against us, you're not personally exposed. She had read the documents. She had signed them. She had trusted that what she was signing was what he said it was. He named the shell company Ashworth Legacy Holdings. She did not know that yet. She would not know it until Tuesday morning, when Roz Tanner slid the incorporation documents across a conference table. But she was already building toward it in her mind, the shape of the thing, the audacity of it. He planned to leave her and keep her legacy. Nate, the recording is still running. I haven't stopped it. Good, don't stop it. Send me the full file in the morning. I need it time-stamped and unedited. He paused. Caroline. I need you to tell me something honestly. Yes. Is there any part of this that surprises you? She sat with the question. The glider moved slightly. Outside, the sky was the particular deep blue that comes before the black starts to lift. The scale of it surprises me, she said finally. The precision, that it started before we were married. She paused. His feelings? She stopped. Whether he ever... She stopped again. You don't have to answer that tonight. No, she said. I'm not going to answer it tonight. What she was going to do was this. She was going to sit in the glider until the sky turned gray. She was going to listen to the house. She was going to let her husband sleep in their bed down the hall, unknowing, and she was going to use every one of the hours between now and morning to build the architecture of what came next. I'm not crazy, she thought. I know what I heard. I know exactly what it means. She opened the Notes app on her phone. She started a new note at 3:44 in the morning. She titled it simply, What I Know, and she began to write. By the time the sky turned pale gray at 5:37, she had 4 pages. Preston came upstairs at 6:15. She heard him move through the bedroom. The shower ran for 8 minutes. She heard the particular sound of the coffee grinder, the one he always used Sunday mornings, the pour-over ritual he had made his own. And she sat in the glider with her phone and her 4 pages of notes, and she breathed. She thought, he is going to come up here with coffee. He did. The nursery door opened at 6:42. He was dressed. He looked rested. He was carrying 2 mugs, one of which he set on the small side table next to the glider. He kissed her forehead. 3 seconds. You're up early, he said. Couldn't sleep, she said. The baby. He looked at the crib. His expression did something careful and fond. She watched it. She filed it. How are you feeling? Tired, she said. I might go to Mom's for a few days. Dr. Howell mentioned reducing stress. Something moved behind his eyes. Almost nothing. A fraction of recalibration that a person who was not watching for it would miss entirely. Of course, Faust said. Whatever you need. He went downstairs. She picked up the coffee. It was exactly the right temperature. He always knew the right temperature. She drank it. It was very good. I deserved better than this, she thought. Not with grief, with certainty. The rain started at 2:14 on Sunday afternoon. Caroline heard it begin on the nursery window while she was changing into clothes that still fit, which had become a smaller and smaller category of her wardrobe. She pulled on dark trousers and a loose cream top, and she stood in front of the mirror for a moment and looked at herself. 8 months, pregnant, dark circles she had stopped trying to conceal 3 weeks ago, hair pulled back, the particular face of a woman who had not slept properly and was not going to allow that to be a problem. She looked like herself. She thought, good? Preston had left for golf at 12:30. He kissed her forehead again, 4 seconds this time. She had counted. He said Clifford sent his best, and that he would be back by 6, and did she want him to pick up dinner? She said, no, thank you. She was going to her mother's. He nodded and picked up his golf bag and walked to his car and did not look back at the house. The moment his car turned out of the driveway, she called Vivian. Now she was 40 minutes into the drive to Nate's office. The rain came down in a steady sheet against the windshield. The GPS said continue straight for 4 miles. The wipers moved in their rhythm, and every red light was a memory she could no longer look at the same way. The first red light was the IPO dinner, 18 months ago. A private room at a restaurant she loved, 12 people around a table, celebrating the successful filing. Preston had raised his glass and said, to the most brilliant woman I have ever met. Everyone had looked at her, and she had felt the warmth of it, the particular warmth of being publicly claimed by your partner in a room full of your peers. She had leaned over and squeezed his hand under the table. he had squeezed back. She saw it differently now. Not the warmth of a husband claiming his wife, the satisfaction of a man confirming that his target was still exactly where he needed her to be. The light changed. She drove. The second red light was 3 years ago. The Hargrove contract. The biggest deal of her company's first decade. And for 6 weeks, it had seemed like it was going to fall apart. She had worked 20-hour days. She had barely eaten. She had come home at 11 at night to find Preston calm and steady and already asleep. And she had slid into bed beside him and felt grateful for the solidity of him. He did not panic. He did not catastrophize. When she woke him and told him she was scared the deal was going to die, he had said, "It won't. You've already done the work. Trust the work." She had always told that story as the story of a good husband, a stabilizing presence. She saw it differently now. He was not calm because he trusted her. He was calm because he had already been in contact with Hargrove's board. She did not know that yet for certain, but she was building toward it, and the shape of it fit. He was calm because he already knew how it would end. She pulled into a gas station, not because she needed gas. The tank was 3/4 full. She pulled in because the rain was coming harder and the memories were coming harder, and she needed 30 seconds of not moving. She sat in the parking lot with her hands on the wheel. She pressed her forehead close to it without touching it. A woman at the next pump glanced over, a quick sideways look, the way people look at someone who is clearly struggling and are not sure whether to say something. Caroline straightened, pulled her sunglasses down from her head to her face, even though the sky was completely gray, pulled back out onto the road. Keep moving. You can fall apart later. Right now, keep moving. The third red light was their honeymoon. Portugal, 5 years ago. A house they rented outside Lisbon with a terrace that overlooked a valley of cork trees. She had stood on that terrace on the third morning and thought, I have actually done it. I have built the company, and I have found the person, and the life that I wanted is the life I have. She had been 29 years old. She had been so certain. Preston had come out with 2 cups of coffee and stood beside her and looked at the valley and said, "You know what I love about you? You never stopped when it was hard. You just kept going." She had thought he was talking about her. She saw now that he was describing himself. He had been talking about himself the entire time, showing her the thing he admired in himself, dressed up as admiration for her. He loved her the way a collector loves a painting. The GPS said, "Your destination is on the right." She pulled into the parking garage. She sat in the car for a moment. Through the smeared rain on the driver's window, she could see Vivian's car already parked 2 spots down. Vivian had driven 40 minutes in the opposite direction to be here. She had not asked why. She had just said, "I'm leaving now." Caroline looked at Vivian's car. She knew something, she thought. For a while. She didn't say anything. She filed that away. Not bitterly, just carefully. There was a conversation to have there. Not today. She got out of the car. Nate's office on a Sunday looked different. The reception desk was empty. The overhead lights were off, and the desk lamps were on, and the effect was something quieter than a normal working day, something that suited the gravity of what was spread across the conference table. Roz Tanner was already there. Roz was 41 years old, compact and precise, with reading glasses she wore on top of her head and moved to her nose when she needed to say something serious. She had a forensic accounting practice that Nate used for complex litigation. She had spent the previous 18 hours pulling apart every document connected to Preston Ashworth's executive access. She was not warm exactly. She was thorough. At this moment, thorough was what Caroline needed. They sat down. Vivian poured water into 4 glasses without being asked. Roz opened a folder. He's been moving money for 31 months, she said, always below reporting thresholds, always with a legitimate-seeming business justification attached to each transfer. She slid the first document across the table. Caroline looked at it. Column after column of transfers, dates, amounts. The business justification codes Preston had attached to each one, consulting fees, operational reserves, infrastructure licensing, every one of them plausible, every one of them just small enough to avoid triggering automatic review. The offshore accounts total $47 million, Roz said. The room was quiet, $47 million, moved in increments over 31 months. While she ran her company and grew her company and thought she was doing it with a partner. The structure, Roz continued. She slid another document across. The accounts are held in a Cayman structure under a shell company. She paused. The company name is Ashworth Legacy Holdings. Caroline looked at the paper. Legacy. He had named it Legacy. He planned to leave me, she said, and keep my legacy. That's what this structure suggests, Nate said quietly. Roz took her glasses from the top of her head and moved them to her nose. The original incorporation date on Ashworth Legacy Holdings, she said, is 14 months before your wedding. The room went completely silent. Vivianen made a sound beside her, a small, sharp intake of breath. Caroline sat very still. 14 months before the wedding. He had built the acquisition structure before he proposed. He had gotten down on one knee with a ring she had loved and said the words she had needed to hear. And the Cayman Shell Company was already incorporated, already waiting, a legal container, ready to receive everything she was going to spend the next 5 years building. This was never a marriage. It was a transaction. She thought she might cry. She identified the feeling the way she identified everything, accurately and without flinching. Grief. The specific grief of realizing the story you have been living inside was a different story than the one you thought. She did not cry, not yet. She had 4 pages of notes in her phone and 48 hours before Preston made his board move, and she was going to use every minute of them. The hardest part, she thought, is admitting I knew something was wrong. Not this, not the scale of this. But something. I felt it sometimes, and I told myself I was tired or anxious or being unfair to him. Starting over feels impossible, but staying feels worse. She picked up her pen. Tell me about the board vote structure, she said. I need to understand exactly how close he is. The printer in the corner of Nate's office had been running for 20 minutes. It produced documents in steady rhythmic batches, and each batch Roz collected and organized into a new folder, and the pile of folders on the conference table grew, and Caroline read every single page. She had been an analyst before she was a founder. Before the company, before the funding rounds, before the Forbes profile that her mother had framed and hung in the living room without asking, she had been a 22-year-old woman in a good suit reading financial documents for 14 hours a day and learning everything she could about how money moved. She had not lost that skill. Preston had perhaps forgotten that she had it. The board vote structure was this. The company had 9 board members. 5 votes were needed to call a special shareholders meeting. In that meeting, Preston intended to introduce a motion to reclassify Caroline's shares as non-voting for the duration of what he would frame as a temporary operational restructuring following the birth of the baby. He had prepared a proposal arguing that a founder taking maternity leave created governance risk. The market, he would argue, needed to see stable, executive leadership during the transition. He had 4 votes confirmed. He needed 1 more. Warren Hutchins, Nate said. Vivian made the sound again. Shorter this time, harder. Warren Hutchins had been on Caroline's board since year 1. She had recruited him personally. She had mentored his daughter through her first startup. She had attended his wife's retirement dinner and given a speech that made the room laugh and then go quiet in the particular way that good speeches do. Warren, she thought, just the name, flat and quiet inside her. She did not say anything else about Warren for now. She looked at the financial documents instead. The $47 million had been moved in 112 separate transactions. Each transaction had a corresponding business justification document, created in Preston's name, authorized through the COO's executive access she had given him. Each justification was plausible enough that it would pass casual review. Only a thorough forensic examination, looking at all 112 transactions together, would reveal the pattern. He had counted on no one doing a thorough forensic examination. He had counted on her being too busy to look. He had been correct until Sunday night at 11:14. The timing of the transfers, Caroline said. Can you map them against company events? Roz looked at her. Yes, I've started that. She slid another document. A timeline. Company milestones on one axis, transfer activity on the other. The pattern was immediate and unmistakable. Every major company event, a funding round closing, a contract signing, a board meeting, was followed within 2 weeks by a cluster of offshore transfers. He had been harvesting the company's growth as it happened. Every time she built something, he took a portion of it and moved it somewhere she could not see. She laid the document flat on the table. She picked up her pen. She set it down. She picked it up again. There was a choice in front of her, Nate had explained. 2 paths, both legal, both viable, with different trade-offs. The first path, go public with the evidence before Preston made his board move. Contact the board members directly. Share Roz's forensic report. Make it impossible for Preston to proceed because the evidence was already on the table. The risk? A media story. 8 months pregnant, public betrayal, company governance crisis. The optics were manageable, but not comfortable. The second path? Move quietly, change the share structure, secure board votes privately, transfer back executive access without revealing her knowledge. Buy time. The risk? Preston might move faster than they anticipated. She had to choose between her dignity and her security. Both felt impossible to lose. She sat with it for 60 seconds. Then, he chose for me when he incorporated that shell company 14 months before our wedding. He made his choice 5.5 years ago. I do not owe him a gentle exit. We go to the board directly, she said. I call them personally. Not through lawyers, not through official channels. I call them myself, individually, with the forensic report and the recording. And I do it before Monday. Nate nodded. He had been waiting for her to arrive at this. I'll need 48 hours to finalize Roz's preliminary report, he said. You'd be making calls Wednesday night. Wednesday night, she said. She looked at Vivian. Vivian was looking back at her with an expression that was complicated and honest. Love and guilt and the particular set of the mouth that meant she had something to say. Viv, Caroline said, did you know? The question sat between them. Vivian was quiet for a beat too long. I suspected something, she said finally. I didn't have proof. I kept hoping I was being paranoid. I wanted to be wrong. Were you going to tell me? I kept waiting for the right moment. Vivian's voice was very careful. With the baby coming, I kept thinking, after, I kept telling myself, after. Caroline looked at the table. I needed to know, she said. Not loudly, not with anger, just with the particular clarity of a fact being stated. I know. Vivian's eyes were wet. I'm sorry. Caroline nodded once. She filed it. There was a conversation to have there. Not today. Today she needed Vivian, and Vivian was here, and that was the thing that mattered. She looked back at the documents. I deserved better than this, she thought. My company deserved better than this. And the person who did this is going to find out exactly who he married. She picked up her pen. She did not put it down again. They drove back as the sun was going down. Vivian drove. Caroline sat in the passenger seat and watched the highway. 20 minutes of quiet. Just the sound of the wipers, slower now, the rain having eased to a fine mist. Then Vivian said, He talked over you in board meetings. For 3 years, I sat there and watched it, and I defended him, Caroline said. Every time. I know. A long pause. The highway lights came on, one by one, as the sky darkened. Then Vivian laughed, just slightly, the complicated kind of laugh that lives right next to crying. He underestimated you spectacularly, Caro. Carolyn looked at the road ahead of them. They always do, she said, and she almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because it had always been true, and she had always known it, and she had spent her entire career turning that consistent, spectacular underestimation into fuel. She was going to do it one more time. Preston came home at 6:28. He brought yellow tulips, her favorite. He set them on the kitchen counter and said Clifford sent his best, and dinner smelled good. Had she cooked? She had not cooked. She had ordered from the Thai place 3 blocks away and transferred it to Real Dishes, which was what she did when she wanted to seem more present in the kitchen than she was. She arranged the tulips in the vase. She said all the right things. She asked about golf. She smiled at the right moments. He poured wine for himself and sparkling water for her, and they sat at the kitchen table and ate and talked about nothing important. And he looked at her with the particular warmth he had always been able to produce on demand. And she looked back at him with the warmth she was producing right now for the last time. He still had no idea. She had 48 hours. She was going to use every single one of them. The rain came back at midnight. Caroline heard it against the window of her childhood bedroom, and she lay on top of the covers in the dark and listened to it and let it be the only thing in the room for a minute. The walls were pale blue. She had painted them herself when she was 15, a project she undertook over a long weekend while her mother watched from the doorway with coffee and periodic commentary about the missed edges. The paint had faded slightly over 20 years, and she had never repainted them. There was a bookshelf along the left wall, still holding the economics textbooks from college and 3 paperback novels with broken spines. The ceiling fan turned at its lowest setting, the one that moved the air without making the room cold. The bed was smaller than she remembered. She had driven here straight from dropping Vivian at her car in Nate's parking garage. She had called her mother from the road. Her mother had picked up on the first ring and said hello the way she always said hello, the particular way that meant, I know something is wrong, and I have been waiting for you to call. She had said, Mom, I'm coming tonight. And her mother had said, I'll make the soup. That was all that needed to be said. She had been in the house for 2 hours before she came upstairs. There had been soup, chicken broth with extra dill, the way she had liked it when she was small and sick, the smell of it filling the kitchen, and there had been her mother, sitting across the table from her, not asking questions, just being there, the way her mother had always been there, solid and warm and completely unhurried. She had told her mother everything. It took 40 minutes. Marge Caldwell listened to all of it without interrupting. Her face did not do the things faces do in performances of shock. Her mother's face did what it always did. It paid attention. When Caroline finished, Marge was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want to tell you something, and I need you to hear it as information and not as a judgment." "Okay." "I never trusted him fully," Marge said. "I want to be precise about that. I didn't distrust him either. I was watching, and in 5 years of watching, I never saw him look at you the way a man looks at a person he has chosen. He looked at you the way a man looks at something he has acquired." Carolyn sat with that. "I thought you liked him," she said. "I was polite to him," her mother said. "There's a difference. I was waiting to be wrong." She paused. "I wanted to be wrong." Carolyn nodded. Marge reached across the table and put her hand over her daughter's. "Go upstairs," she said. "Get in the bed. I'll check on you." Now it was midnight, and the rain was on the window, and she was lying on the small bed in the blue room, and the thing she had been holding since Sunday night was finally finding its way to the surface. She thought about the professor, the one from her second year of college, analytically gifted, but perhaps lacking the executive presence required for C-suite leadership. She had been 20 years old. She had sat on the floor of her dorm room that night, with her back against the bed, and thought, "Watch me." She slid off the bed. She sat on the floor with her back against the mattress. Her hands rested on her belly. The baby was awake. She could feel the small, persistent movements, the shifts and adjustments that had become the rhythm of her nights over the last month. She thought, "I thought I had won. The company, the funding rounds, the Forbes profile, the board members who now returned her calls within an hour, the husband who said he believed in her." She had thought she had actually won. She had thought she had found the version of her life where the work paid off in every direction. God, she thought, I was so certain. She sat on the floor and let herself be uncertain for a while. Did he love me at all? Even at the beginning? She could not answer that. She might never be able to answer it. The uncertainty of it was its own kind of grief, separate from the anger and the strategy and the plan, the not knowing whether any of it was real. The first miscarriage, 14 months into the marriage. He had held her for hours. She had felt so held. Was that real? She genuinely did not know. Maybe some of it was real. Maybe you could be a calculating man and still be capable of genuine grief. People were complex. Life was not a story where villains were villains from the first frame. But he had started the shell company before he proposed. She pressed her hands flat on the floor on either side of her. Somewhere along the way, she thought, I became invisible to him. Or maybe I was never fully visible. Maybe he saw the company and the potential, and he constructed a version of me that matched what he needed to see. The baby moved, a long, slow shift that she had learned to recognize as her daughter repositioning, finding a new configuration. The door opened quietly. Marge did not knock. She never had. She sat down on the floor next to Caroline. Two women on the floor of a childhood bedroom, the older one putting her arm around the rounder one. Marge did not say, "It's going to be okay." She did not say, "You're so strong." She did not say any of the things that people say when they are performing comfort rather than providing it. She said, "I made the soup with the extra dill, the way you liked it when you were small." And Caroline cried, not the composed kind of crying, the real kind, the shaking kind, the kind she had been holding since 11:14 on Sunday night, the kind that had been waiting behind the strategy and the notes and the steady voice on the phone with Nate, the kind that had been pressed down under everything competent she had done in the last 48 hours. She cried until there was nothing left. And then Marge brought the soup. They sat together against the bed and ate soup from mugs and Marge told the story about the time Caroline's father got lost driving to a wedding in a town 2 hours away and refused to ask directions for 90 minutes. It was a funny story. She had told it 100 times. She told it now, and Caroline laughed in the middle of crying, and then finished crying, and then just laughed. He would have been furious, Marge said, about Preston. He would have been so quietly, thoroughly furious. I know, Caroline said. And then he would have said, "So what are we going to do about it?" In exactly that order. The fury first, and then the plan. Caroline looked at the mug in her hands. "I'm already on the plan," she said. "I know," Marge said. "You've been on the plan since Sunday night." She paused. "That's my daughter." At 3 in the morning, Caroline was still awake, but something had shifted. She picked up her phone. Not to search anything, not to check anything. She opened the Notes app, the same one she had used since she was 24, the one with ideas and lists going back a decade, and she opened a new note and she started writing. Not the legal strategy, not the evidence catalog. Something different, what I know about myself, what I still have, what I will do with it. The writing was not neat. The thoughts were not linear. She wrote about the company and about Eleanor, and about the floor she had been right to install radiant heating in, and about the garden that needed landscaping, and about yellow tulips, which she was going to have to decide how she felt about. She wrote for 90 minutes. At 4:27, she read what she had written. Then she opened a new note and titled it, "Things I Want My Daughter to Know." She wrote one line, "You are allowed to trust people. When they betray that trust, it is their failure, not yours." Then she put the phone face down on the floor beside her and looked at the ceiling and breathed. The prison door, she thought, has been unlocked the whole time. I just have to decide to walk through it. The keyboard made a clean, precise sound in the quiet of the home office. Click, click, click. Not rushing, not frantic. The sound of someone who knew exactly what she was doing and was doing it without wasting a single movement. Caroline had come home Tuesday morning. Preston was at the office. She had a list. She had been making lists her entire professional life. The discipline of the list was this. You put everything on it so your brain did not have to carry it, and then you worked through it in order, and the order mattered, and you did not skip items, and you did not add items that were not already on the list, because new items mid-task were how things got missed. The list today was 11 items long. Item 1. Change executive access credentials on all company systems. She sat at the desk in the home office. Her desk, she had bought it herself. A solid oak piece that she had found at an estate sale 7 years ago and refinished herself over a long weekend. Preston had started docking his laptop here 3 months ago because his own laptop was in the shop. She had moved his things to the left side and kept her right side clear. She opened the company portal. She navigated to the user management system. She entered her credentials. She changed them. Then she changed Preston's access level from executive to read-only, pending HR review. She documented the change and timestamp and sent a copy to Nate. Item 1, done. Item 2, company banking portal. Item 3, the share registry access. Item 4, the legal document vault. She worked through them in order. She did not hurry. The baby was calm today, settled low, and the house was very quiet, except for the sound of the keyboard and the occasional distant sound of a car passing on the street outside. She was halfway through item 6 when she opened Preston's desk drawer to retrieve a document she needed. Her own document, a legal filing from 18 months ago she remembered putting there. She found the burner phone. She held it in her hand for a moment. It was a basic model. No case. Screen dark. The kind of phone you bought with cash at a convenience store and used for a specific purpose and replaced when that purpose was complete. She held it without turning it on. She looked at it. She set it on the desk. She picked up her own phone. She photographed it in the drawer, in context, without moving it. She closed the drawer. She added the photograph to the evidence folder. He thought I was too busy building the company to look inside my own desk drawer, she thought. He knew me so well. He understood me so little. She went back to item 6. Item 9 was the board member calls. She had 3 names on her list for Tuesday. The 3 board members she knew best, the 3 with whom her relationship was genuinely personal, not just professional. The first call took 22 minutes. The board member was quiet throughout. At the end, he said, "Send me the forensic report when it's finalized. You have my vote." The second call took 31 minutes. More questions, more careful listening. At the end, "I'm ashamed I didn't see it. You have my vote." The third call took 14 minutes because this board member had already sensed something was wrong and had been waiting, she said, for Caroline to call. 3 votes confirmed, hers plus 3. She needed 1 more to secure a majority before Preston attempted to use his 4. She texted Nate, 3 confirmed. Warren? He texted back, working on it, Wednesday. She went back to the list. Item 11 was the last one. She had put it last intentionally, the way she always put the thing she was least certain about at the end of the list, so she could come to it with everything else already done. Item 11, Delia Forsyth. The text had come, in that morning at 9:47. Unknown number. "I think we need to talk. I've made a mistake. DF." She had looked at the text for a long time. Then she had forwarded it to Nate. He called back in 4 minutes. "It's a trap, or it's a gift," he said. "Either way, you have nothing to lose from listening. She can't hurt you with information you already have. And if she has something you don't, where do I meet her? Public place. Your choice. Take Vivian. Have her in a separate car nearby." She chose a coffee shop 12 blocks from the office. Tuesday afternoon at 2. She told Vivian. Vivian said she would be in the parking lot with her phone on. She arrived 5 minutes early. Delia was already there. She was sitting at a corner table with her hands wrapped around a cup she had not drunk from. In person, she looked smaller than she did in the office. Not physically. She was taller than Caroline had registered, but something about her took up less space. She had the look of someone who had not slept properly in days. Caroline sat across from her. She waited. Delia spoke first. "He told me the company was already half mine through the offshore structure," she said. Her voice was steady but thin, like something under strain. "He told me you knew about the arrangement, that it was a business separation you'd agreed to, that the marriage was a formality you were both keeping for the sake of the company's public image." Caroline said nothing. "He told me the baby wasn't yours biologically, that you were using a surrogate because of medical reasons you didn't want public, that you and he had been—" She stopped. She looked at the table. "He told me a lot of things." Caroline waited. "I'm 8 months pregnant," she said, simply. Delia closed her eyes. The coffee shop sounds moved around them. The hiss of an espresso machine, someone laughing at another table. The ordinary sounds of an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. "I know," Delia said. Her eyes opened. They were tired. Not soft exactly, but tired in a way that was honest. "I know how this looks. I know what I am in this story. I'm not asking you to understand or forgive me. I'm not asking for anything," she paused. "Except maybe for you to listen for 3 minutes." Caroline looked at her. "I've been keeping records," Delia said. "Since about 6 months in, When things that he said stopped adding up, when the story kept changing in small ways that I told myself didn't matter. She reached into her bag. She set a flash drive on the table between them. Texts, emails, recordings from the offshore account calls. I used the transcription feature on my phone. I didn't even plan it at first. I just started, keeping things, because I knew that if he would do this to you. She stopped. I knew I needed to be able to prove what happened to me too. She slid the flash drive across the table. Caroline looked at it. The mistress, she thought, became my most important witness. She picked up the flash drive. She put it in her jacket pocket. She looked at Delia Forsyth for a long moment. The records on this drive, she said, are they complete? Everything? Everything I have, Delia said. Every conversation where he discussed the board vote. Every offshore account call I was present for. 18 months of documentation. Caroline nodded. I'm going to have my lawyer review this, she said. If it's what you say it is, it changes the legal picture significantly. She paused. I'm not going to thank you. You know why. I know why, Delia said. Caroline stood up. For what it's worth, she said, I don't think you're a terrible person. I think you were a person who believed a story that was designed to be believed. She paused. He's very good at that. She left the coffee shop without looking back. The hardest part, she thought, walking to her car, wasn't the betrayal. The hardest part was learning that the story I'd been telling myself for 5 years wasn't the story at all. But now I know the real one, and I'm the one holding the pen. The elevator opened on the 42nd floor at 8:53 in the morning. Caroline stepped out. The floor was the company's executive level. She had designed this space herself, the same as she had designed most things she cared about. Clean lines, good light, the kind of space that felt serious without feeling hostile. She had wanted people to feel that they could think clearly here. She walked to the boardroom. Her heels on the polished concrete made a sound she had always liked. Solid, purposeful, the sound of someone who knew where she was going. She opened the boardroom door. She was the first one there. She chose her seat deliberately, the head of the table. She sat down. She placed her documents in front of her. She placed Nate's legal brief to her right. She placed Roz's forensic report, bound and tabbed, in front of her. She placed her phone face down to her left. She folded her hands on the table. She breathed. One by one, the board members arrived. Nate came in with Roz. Vivian took a seat along the side wall as VP of Operations rather than board member. The others filtered in over the next 7 minutes, finding their seats, reading the room in the way people read rooms when something feels different without being able to say why. 6 of the 9 nodded at her when they sat down. Warren Hutchins sat at the far end of the table and looked at the surface in front of him. At 9:02, Preston walked in. He stopped in the doorway. She watched him. She watched him take in the room. The full board. Roz Tanner, whose presence was not routine. Nate, whose presence was not usual on a Thursday. Caroline at the head of the table. All 9 board members already seated. She watched him understand, in real time, that something had changed. He was good. She'd always known he was good at this. His face moved through several things in the space of 2 seconds and settled on neutral with undertones of warmth. He was recalibrating even as he stood in the doorway. She could see it. Caroline, he said. I didn't know you'd be. Sit down, Preston, she said. She did not raise her voice. He sat. She presented for 38 minutes. She walked the board through the forensic report in full. The offshore structure, the 112 transactions, the dates and amounts, and the pattern they formed when viewed as a whole. The shell company, its name, its incorporation date, 14 months before the wedding, the board vote scheme, the proxy materials prepared for Monday, the 4 votes he had secured. She presented it the way she had always presented everything that mattered, with precision, with data, with the particular authority of a woman who knew every single number in the room and knew that she knew them and did not need to prove that she knew them. She was not angry in her presentation. Anger would have given him something to work with. She was clear. Preston attempted to speak twice. Both times, Nate placed one hand flat on the table and said, "There will be time for response. Please allow the presentation to complete." And both times, Preston stopped. The second time, he looked at her. She did not look back at him. She continued presenting. When she finished, she closed the folder. She looked at Preston directly for the first time since Sunday night. "I want you to know," she said, "that I heard everything you said on Sunday. Everything." He had no color left in his face. The room was very quiet. "The motion to remove Preston Ashworth as Chief Operating Officer will be voted on now," Nate said. "This removal is for cause, as documented in the forensic report and supporting materials distributed to all board members yesterday evening. All in favor?" 5 hands went up immediately, then a 6th, then a 7th. Warren Hutchins raised his hand last. 9 hands, unanimous. The sound of it, she thought afterward, was not triumph. Triumph was loud. This was quiet. 9 hands in the air, in a room where the only sound was the ventilation system and the distant hum of the city 42 floors below, and the sound of a man being held accountable for what he had done, and the sound of 9 people who had been told a story finally having the real one. The room began to empty. Preston remained seated. She did not look at him again. She gathered her documents. She thanked Roz quietly. She squeezed Nate's arm. At the door, she paused. She thought about whether there was anything she needed to say. She looked at the room, the table she had chosen, the chairs she had specified, the light she had designed to fall through the windows at this exact angle in the morning. Everything in this room was hers. She did not need to say anything. She walked out. Nate caught up with her in the hallway. He walked beside her in silence for a moment. Then he said, "That was the best presentation I've ever seen in a boardroom." "It had good source material," she said. They reached the elevator. She pressed the button. "What happens now?" she said. "His lawyer calls mine by end of day," Nate said. "They know they can't fight the forensic report. The settlement negotiation starts Friday." She nodded. The elevator arrived. She stepped in. She turned around. "Nate?" "Yes." "Thank you for answering on the second ring." The elevator doors closed. The door closed, not slamming, just closing. The simple final sound of a door that was not going to open the same way again. It was a Tuesday morning in mid-October when Preston Ashworth moved the last of his things out of the house she had designed and built and filled with herself. He had a car waiting. He had a lawyer present, which her lawyer had requested. He took what the settlement specified. He left what it specified. He did not come into the nursery. She was standing in the hallway when he passed, carrying a box of personal items. He stopped when he saw her. Something moved across his face. She had spent 5 years trying to read that face, and now she found she was not trying anymore. She was just looking at it. "Caroline," he said. She waited. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked at the box in his hands. Whatever he had been going to say, he decided against it. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay." He walked to the front door. He opened it. He went through it. The door closed. She stood in the hallway for a long moment. The house was very quiet. 8 months pregnant and standing in the hallway of the house she had designed, and the house felt like hers in a way it had not felt in 5 years. She walked to the kitchen. She made a pour-over coffee, her own. She had always known how she had just allowed the ritual to become his because he had done it every Sunday morning, and she had let a small thing become his thing without noticing. She stood at the counter and made the coffee with the care it required, and she poured it into the blue mug she liked best, and she sat down at the kitchen table. She sat there for a long time. Then she opened her notes app and found the note she had started in her mother's house on the floor at 4 in the morning, and she added a line, "To things I want my daughter to know. You are allowed to grieve what you thought you had. That grief does not mean you were wrong to love. It means you were fully alive." She looked at what she had written. She added one more line. "The things you build with your hands are yours. Never let anyone tell you otherwise." The settlement terms were this: Preston relinquished all company shares, all board positions, all claims to any company assets. The Ashworth Legacy holding structure was unwound under court supervision, and $41 million of the $47 million was recovered. $4 million was unrecoverable through the Cayman structure, and Nate had advised her to accept this and move forward rather than spend years litigating for the remainder. She accepted it. She moved forward. Preston retained his personal accounts, diminished significantly from what they had been before the forensic recovery. He retained the lake house, the one his parents had given them as a wedding gift. She had never liked that house. It was cold in the way some beautiful things are cold, impressive without being warm. He was welcome to it. She kept the house they had built together. She kept it because it was a good house. She kept it because the nursery was sage green and the floors were radiant heated, and the garden, finally. She had hired the crew herself. 2 weeks after the board meeting, was starting to look like something. The roses were coming in. Vivienne called at noon on the day the agreement was signed. She cried in the way Vivienne always cried, loudly, freely, without any apparent concern for composure. Caroline sat at the kitchen table with her coffee going cold and listened to her best friend cry, and felt something complicated and warm move through her chest. "I hated the way he talked over you in board meetings," Vivienne said through the crying. "I've hated it for 3 years. You said that before," Caroline said. "I'm saying it again. I need to say it more times." "Okay." He was so smug, that particular way of being smug where you pretend you're not being smug. He had it so perfectly. "He did," Caroline agreed. "I should have said something. You're saying things now. Caro." Vivienne's voice shifted, got quieter. "How are you, actually?" Caroline looked at the kitchen window, the garden beyond it, the new rose canes, small and bare now, but placed correctly, in the right soil, in the right light. "I'm sad," she said. "I'm actually sad. Not about him, about the story I thought I was in, about the version of my life I thought I had." "That makes sense." "And She paused. "I feel like myself, for the first time in a while. I feel like I know exactly where I am and what I'm doing and why. And that feels—" She paused again. "It feels like enough. Right now, it feels like enough." A pause. Then Vivienne said, "He underestimated you spectacularly, Caro." And Caroline laughed, the surprised kind. The kind that comes when something is funny and sad and true all at the same time, and your body doesn't know which response to send, so it sends all of them. "They always do," she said. There was a moment, late that week, when she was sorting through the last of Preston's things that had been missed. Small items, a book, a pair of cufflinks, a photograph, and she found a picture of the two of them from their 2nd anniversary. Portugal, again, a different trip. They were standing on a street in Lisbon, both laughing at something outside the frame. She did not remember what they were laughing at. She looked at herself in the photograph for a long time. That woman was happy. Whatever else was true, in that moment, she was genuinely happy. She set the photograph down. She thought about what her mother had said. He looked at you the way a man looks at something he has acquired. And she thought, maybe, probably. But that woman in the photograph was happy, and the happiness was real, even if what generated it was not. You can't always know what's true in the moment, she thought. Sometimes you can only find out later. The finding out later does not retroactively erase the person you were. She was a woman who loved fully and trusted deeply and built things that lasted. That those qualities were taken advantage of did not make them flaws. They were the best things about her. She was going to make sure Eleanor knew that. A heartbeat. The particular rhythm of it, strong and fast and steady, filling the room from the monitor on the wall. Caroline had been listening to that sound for 8 months at every appointment. It never got ordinary. She was in the hospital bed with the monitoring leads attached, and the room smelled like antiseptic and the specific clean warmth of heated air, and her mother was asleep in the chair, in the corner, a blanket someone had brought, her, pulled up to her chin. It was 4:30 in the morning, and it was raining again. She had been here since 9 o'clock the previous night, when the contractions had started with the particular, unmistakable quality that Dr. Howell had told her to watch for. She had called her mother first, then she had called Vivian, who was currently in the waiting room with apparently enough food to supply an entire hospital floor. Then she had called Nate, who had said, "Call me the moment she arrives. I will be there with flowers." She had not called Preston. There was a protocol for that, agreed upon through the lawyers. He would be notified after the birth. He had no legal presence required at the delivery. She lay in the hospital bed in the early morning and listened to her daughter's heartbeat and felt the deep, rolling, tightening, and release that had been building in intensity for 7 hours, and she thought about everything and nothing. Eleanor Ashworth was born at 7:42 in the morning on a Tuesday during a thunderstorm. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. A voice she used immediately and with conviction. Dark hair, damp and fine, pressed flat against a round head. Eyes that were currently the indeterminate blue of all new people and would take weeks to settle into their actual color. She had Caroline's nose. Everyone said so, immediately and with certainty. Dr. Howell placed her on Caroline's chest. Caroline put her hands around her daughter. The room made sounds. The particular efficient sounds of a delivery room returning to order, equipment being moved, voices talking quietly, the rain still on the window. None of it touched the small circumference of warmth that was Caroline and Eleanor in the center of the room. She looked at her daughter's face. Eleanor looked back with the unfocused concentration of someone encountering light and air for the first time and finding it interesting. "Hello?" Caroline thought. "There you are." Her mother came in at 8:15, still in the clothes she had slept in. She stood at the side of the bed and looked at Eleanor for a long moment without speaking. Then she put one finger against Eleanor's cheek very gently. "Hello, darling," she said. Eleanor turned toward the touch, the way babies turn toward warmth. Marge sat down on the edge of the bed beside Caroline. She put her arm around her daughter. They sat together, with the baby between them and the rain on the window and the room slowly warming. "She has Dad's forehead," Caroline said. "She does," Marge said. "He would have been—" She stopped. "He would have talked to her non-stop from the first day. You know how he was." "I know," Caroline said. "I'm going to tell her every story. You remember all of them?" "Every single one." Marge squeezed her arm. Vivian came in at 8:45 and cried, loudly and freely and exactly as expected. She took an approximately 700 photographs. She said Eleanor was the most beautiful person she had ever seen in her life, and she said it with such total conviction that it was impossible to doubt her. Nate arrived at 10 and brought yellow tulips. Caroline looked at the tulips. She looked at them for a moment with the full understanding of what they had meant and what they now meant. Two things at once, the past and the present in the same vase. Yellow tulips can just be yellow tulips again, she thought. I'm deciding that right now. They're perfect, she said. Thank you, Nate. He smiled. He did not make a speech. He sat in the chair near the window and looked at Eleanor with the expression of a man who had known her mother for 12 years and was thoroughly and completely relieved. That night, the hospital room was quiet. Her mother had gone to sleep again in the chair. Vivian had gone home with strict instructions to return tomorrow. Nate had gone back to the office. Caroline was awake. Eleanor was sleeping on her chest, the warm, solid weight of her, the tiny, serious breathing, the small fists pressed against her collarbone. Caroline looked at the ceiling. She thought about the nursery monitor, the white noise, the 11:14 timestamp. She thought about standing in the sage green room, folding a duck onesie and hearing the crackle of static, and then her husband's voice, and then the world reorganizing itself around a new truth. She thought, I spent 6 weeks being afraid, and I spent 6 weeks being angry, and I spent 6 weeks building the counter, and now I am here. She thought about the floor of her mother's bedroom, and the soup with the extra dill, and the notes app, and the 4 pages she had written at 3 in the morning. The prison door had been unlocked the whole time. She was just too busy being married to notice. She looked at Eleanor. She thought about what Marge had said, sitting at the kitchen table the night Caroline arrived. He looked at you the way a man looks at something he has acquired. She looked at her daughter's sleeping face. I will never be acquired, she thought, and neither will you. I'm going to make very sure of that. And she thought about the list. Things I want my daughter to know. The note on her phone, growing slowly. You are allowed to trust people. You are allowed to grieve what you thought you had. The things you build with your hands are yours. She added one more item in her mind, quietly, without picking up the phone. You came from a woman who heard the worst thing and responded with the best version of herself. That is your inheritance. That is what I'm leaving you. Eleanor stirred, a small sound, not quite waking, then settled back into the particular deep sleep of new people who have had a very eventful first day. I've got you, Carolyn said, not loudly. Just to Eleanor, just in the space between them. I've got you, she said again. We're okay. A baby's laugh. The full-body helpless kind. The kind that babies have before they understand laughter is a thing you can choose to do back when it just happens to you because something is wonderful, and the response to wonderful things is to laugh with your entire self. Eleanor was 11 months old, and she had discovered that dropping things and watching them get picked up was the greatest game ever invented. She dropped a soft block from her high chair. Marge picked it up. Eleanor laughed. Marge said, Again, do it again. Eleanor dropped it again, more laughing. The kitchen filled with it. Caroline stood in the doorway with her coffee and watched them. It was a Saturday morning in October. 1 year, almost exactly, since the night she stood in the nursery, folding onesies, and heard the white noise crackle into her husband's voice. The garden outside the kitchen window was in the last of its fall color. The roses finished now. The beds prepared for winter. The crew had done good work. She had told them so and hired them for spring. The house smelled like coffee and something sweet from the oven. Marge had arrived Friday evening and immediately assessed that no baking had happened in the previous week and corrected this problem. Eleanor dropped the block again. Marge picked it up, laughing. Caroline drank her coffee. The company had completed its best fiscal year in its history. Not marginally better. Significantly. The kind of year that generated coverage in publications she respected, and offers she had not solicited, and a team morale that was palpably, measurably different from the previous year, when the executive level had been conducting a subtle and invisible civil war that she had not fully understood until it was over. Vivian was president now. The promotion had taken effect 6 weeks after the board meeting. She had earned it for years before she received it, and the board had approved it unanimously. All 9 votes, same as the other unanimous vote of the month, though the mood of the room had been considerably more celebratory. Roz Tanner was CFO. She had accepted the offer with the same precision she brought to everything, outlining her conditions crisply and signing the contract 3 days later. She wore her reading glasses on her nose now more than on her head, which Caroline had decided was a sign of being at home. Nate remained her attorney. He had a framed photograph of Eleanor on his desk, which Caroline had not asked him to put there, but had not asked him to remove. Preston Ashworth was at the lake house. This was the information she had, and it was the extent of the information she required. He had settled fully. The offshore recovery was 91% complete, the remaining 9% buried in a Cayman structure that would take years to fully unwind. She had decided, on Nate's advice, to accept the outcome and invest the legal fees she would have spent on further pursuit into the company instead. It was the right decision. She did not second-guess it. His name did not appear on any company document. His access credentials had been deactivated 11 months ago. The company had, in the careful way of organizations that need to right themselves after disruption, simply absorbed the change and moved forward. Companies were like that. They were made of people who, mostly, wanted to do good work. Give them the conditions to do that, and they would. She had always believed this. The last year had confirmed it. Delia Forsyth had left the company. She was working, as of the last information Caroline had, as an operations consultant at a small firm in another city. She had not contacted Caroline after the coffee shop meeting. Caroline had not contacted her. They were not friends. They were not enemies. They were 2 women who had been, in different ways and to very different degrees, deceived by the same man. The asymmetry of that did not erase the fact. Her mother had asked once what she felt about Delia. Caroline had thought about it honestly. I think she was a woman who made bad choices because she was told a story she wanted to believe, she said. I've done that too. That's generous, Marge said. It's accurate, Sam, Caroline said. Marge had nodded. She had not disagreed. Warren Hutchins called on the first anniversary of the board meeting. She picked up on the second ring. I wanted to mark the date, Sab, he said. I'm not sure that's appropriate. It's fine, Warren. I think about it. What I almost did. What I would have. He stopped. You didn't, she said. That's not. Warren? You didn't. That's what matters. A pause. She got into her first choice of graduate school, he said. His daughter, the one she had mentored. She wanted me to tell you. She said you'd want to know? Caroline smiled. I do want to know. Tell her congratulations. Tell her to call me when she's ready to talk about what comes next. I will. A pause. Thank you, Caroline. Good work, Warren, she said. Keep doing it. She hung up. The nursery was still sage green. She had thought, once or twice, about repainting it. Something different for Eleanor, something of her own choosing, rather than the color Caroline had chosen before she was born. But Eleanor seemed to find the sage green agreeable. She would wake in the mornings and look at the walls with the interested seriousness that she applied to everything, and she did not appear to object. Caroline had decided to wait until Eleanor could tell her what she wanted. That seemed right. It was evening, and Eleanor was in the crib, and the mobile above it, small white stars and crescent moons, turned slowly in the draft from the heating vent. The sound machine breathed its steady ocean hiss. The floor was warm under Caroline's feet. She sat in the glider. The baby monitor was on the dresser. She looked at it. She picked it up. The little green sound level bar was flat and quiet. The house was entirely still. Eleanor was breathing with the deep, even quality of a person who was very tired from a full day of dropping blocks and laughing at the results. She turned the monitor in her hands once. She looked at the timestamp display. She looked at the recording indicator, dark, inactive. She set it back on the dresser. She sat in the glider in the same spot where, 13 months ago, she had held a duck onesie and heard the white noise crackle into a voice that changed everything. She sat in that exact spot now, and she breathed in the lavender from the reed diffuser on the windowsill, and she listened to her daughter breathe. The garden was bare now, prepared for winter. But the roses had been planted correctly, in the right soil, in the right light. They would come back in spring, stronger for having gone dormant. She had read that about roses. The dormancy was not decline. It was preparation. She looked at Eleanor's sleeping face. I built this, she thought, every single brick of it. This time, it was a completely different thought. The same words, but different all the way through, from the first syllable to the last. Not the thought of a woman cataloging her defenses, the thought of a woman looking at her life and finding it good. You know what I want you to know, she said quietly. Eleanor did not stir. She was deeply, peacefully asleep. I want you to know that you came into the world during the hardest 6 weeks of my life, Caroline said, and that every single thing I did in those 6 weeks, I did for you, for what your life is going to be. She paused. I want you to know that trust is not a weakness. The people who tell you it is have usually been hurt and decided that protecting themselves from hurt was more important than being fully alive. It isn't. Be fully alive. The mobile turned, stars and moons. I want you to know that the underestimation is coming. It will come more than once. People will look at you and decide, before you've opened your mouth, that you are less than you are. And I want you to know, I really want you to know this, that the underestimation is the last mistake they ever make. She smiled. Your grandmother will tell you the same thing. She told me, and it turned out to be the truest thing she ever said. Eleanor made a small sound in her sleep. A breath, a shift, a settling. You are going to be so loved, Caroline said. So entirely, unconditionally loved. By me, by your grandmother, who already has opinions about your hair, by Vivian, who will teach you things I will probably not approve of, and will do it with tremendous enthusiasm. By Nate, who put a picture of you on his desk without asking me, and I find I don't mind at all. She looked at her daughter. The woman who sat in this chair 13 months ago was afraid she would lose everything, she said. She didn't lose everything. She found out what everything actually was, and it turned out to be so much more than she knew. She set the glider moving with one push of her foot, the gentle, rocking rhythm, the ocean sound machine, the warm floor under her bare feet, the sage-green walls in the low light, Eleanor sleeping in the crib that Caroline had assembled herself, in the room that was theirs. She was 35 years old, and she had a company that was growing, and a daughter who laughed at dropped blocks, and a mother who made soup with extra dill, and friends who drove 40 minutes in the rain without being asked. She had a garden with roses that would come back in spring. She had a house that was hers in every room. She had rebuilt the life she deserved, not from nothing, from everything she had always had, which was more than she had known, because she had been too busy looking at what he was taking to see clearly what he could never touch. The mobile turned, stars and moons. Outside, the October wind moved through the bare rose canes. They bent and held, the way things do when they have been planted deeply enough. Caroline sat in the glider and listened to her daughter breathe. She did not need to say anything else. She was home. Closing disclaimer. The story you just heard was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team, created to bring you meaning, emotional truth, and the kind of lesson that stays with you long after the last word